El Mencho is dead, and Mexico is burning because of it. On February 22nd, 2026, one of the most dangerous men alive was killed, and within hours, Mexico was on fire. Not figuratively, literally. Buses burning, cars burning. Highways blocked across 20 states. Guadalajara, one of the host cities for the 2026 FIFA World Cup, turned into a ghost town overnight. The US Embassy issued shelter-in-place orders for American citizens in multiple states. Airlines cancelled flights to Puerto Vallarta and Guadalajara. Schools closed, and at least 25 members of Mexico's National Guard were killed in the aftermath. All because one man died. His name was Nemesio Ruben Oseguera Cervantes, but the world knew him as El Mencho. Who was El Mencho? El Mencho was 59 years old, born in poverty in the western Mexican state of Michoacán. In the 1980s, like many young Mexicans chasing survival, he crossed into the United States as an undocumented immigrant. He ended up in California, and that's where his story took a dark turn. In California, he was arrested multiple times on drug charges and sentenced to several years in federal prison. When he was released, he was deported back to Mexico. No money, no options, just a criminal record and a country he had left behind. What happened next is where the story gets complicated. He briefly worked as a police officer. Let that sink in. The man who would one day become the most feared drug lord in Mexico once wore a badge, but that didn't last. He drifted into the criminal underworld, linking up with the Mencho cartel and rising through its ranks, learning the trade, the violence, the power of organized crime. When the Mencho cartel fractured, El Mencho did not disappear with it. Around 2007 to 2009, he co-founded something new, something that would grow into a monster. The Jalisco New Generation Cartel, known by its Spanish initials, CJNG. What was CJNG? The DEA considers CJNG as powerful as the Sinaloa cartel, the organization that gave us El Chapo. Let that land for a second. Under El Mencho's leadership, CJNG became one of the most aggressive, most violent, and most sophisticated criminal organizations in the world. They didn't just traffic drugs, they went to war. They trafficked massive quantities of cocaine, methamphetamine, and fentanyl into all 50 US states. They expanded their operations into Latin America, Europe, and Asia. They moved into fuel theft, crude oil smuggling, extortion, and human trafficking. In 2020, CJNG members launched a brazen assassination attempt against Mexico's security minister in the heart of Mexico City using grenades and high-powered rifles. In February 2025, the Trump administration designated CJNG as a foreign terrorist organization. The US State Department put a $15 million bounty on El Mencho's head. And through all of it, El Mencho remained a ghost, so elusive that all photographs of him known to authorities were decades old. He was the most wanted man in Mexico, hunted by both the Mexican government and US intelligence agencies. And for years, nobody could touch him. The operation that ended it. On Sunday morning, February 22nd, 2026, Mexican special forces moved into the small town of Tapalpa in the state of Jalisco, about 90 kilometers south of Guadalajara. The tip that led them there came from a trusted man who had access to El Mencho's hideout, a person connected to one of the cartel leader's lovers, according to Mexico's defense secretary. US intelligence agencies had helped Mexican authorities dismantle El Mencho's information networks and pinpoint his location. The operation involved the Mexican Air Force and the National Guard's Immediate Reaction Special Force. When troops closed in, they came under heavy fire from El Mencho's guards. In the firefight, 4 CJNG operatives were killed at the scene. 3 others, including El Mencho himself, were critically wounded. El Mencho was airlifted toward Mexico City. He died en route. The Mexican military seized armored vehicles and weaponry at the scene, including rocket launchers capable of shooting down aircraft. 2 CJNG members were arrested. U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Christopher Landau confirmed the death and called El Mencho one of the bloodiest and most ruthless drug kingpins. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt stated that the U.S. had provided intelligence support for the operation. Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum applauded the operation and called for calm. But calm was already gone. The country burns. Within hours of El Mencho's death, CJNG unleashed what security experts called a strategic communication, a coordinated display of power designed to send one message: we are still here, and we are not afraid. Over 250 narco blockades were erected across 20 of Mexico's 32 states, not just in Jalisco, across the entire country: Colima, Michoacán, Nayarit, Guanajuato, Tamaulipas. State after state, cartel members forced civilians out of their cars at gunpoint, then set those cars on fire to block highways. Buses were hijacked and burned. Supermarkets were set ablaze. Banco del Bienestar branches, a government-run bank, were attacked across the country. Puerto Vallarta, one of Mexico's most beloved tourist destinations, was described as being under siege. Thick black smoke rose above beachfront hotels as more than 10 vehicles and businesses were set on fire throughout the city. In Guadalajara, a city that will host 4 FIFA World Cup matches in just a few months, including games involving Mexico, South Korea, Spain, Uruguay, and Colombia, the city became a ghost town. Public transport was suspended. Schools were cancelled. The governor activated a code red state of emergency. 4 professional soccer matches were postponed. American Airlines, Delta, Southwest, Alaska Airlines, and Air Canada all cancelled flights into Puerto Vallarta and Guadalajara. The U.S. Embassy urged American nationals to shelter in place. The U.S. State Department issued warnings for citizens in Jalisco, Tamaulipas, Michoacán, Guerrero, and Nuevo León. By Monday morning, 25 members of Mexico's National Guard had been killed in Jalisco alone. 8 CJNG members were killed in the immediate operation. 34 more criminals were killed in incidents following the operation. 3 Mexican soldiers were wounded. What happens now? Here is the uncomfortable truth that security experts keep saying. Killing the boss doesn't end the cartel. History has shown this over and over again. El Chapo was captured. The Sinaloa cartel survived. Countless cartel leaders have been killed or imprisoned, and their organizations fractured into something more violent, not less. Former DEA Chief of International Operations Mike Vigil said El Mencho's death has sent psychological shockwaves through CJNG, but warned that the real danger now is the succession battle inside the cartel. Security analyst David Salcedo warned that if CJNG interprets the operation as an attempt at extermination rather than simply law enforcement, the cartel could adopt a posture of total war against the Mexican state. Analysts point to El Mencho's stepson, Juan Carlos González Valencia, who controls the cartel's paramilitary wing, as the most likely successor. But analysts also warn that if he cannot consolidate power, up to 5 or 6 CJNG commanders could splinter off and create their own criminal organizations, which historically leads to an explosion of violence across territories as those factions fight for control. Al Jazeera's John Holman put it plainly. So this, at the moment, is a triumph for the Mexican government, but it could turn into an even bigger problem in the weeks and months ahead. The World Cup question. The 2026 FIFA World Cup begins in June, just 4 months away. Guadalajara is scheduled to host multiple matches. The inaugural match of the entire tournament is set for Estadio Azteca in Mexico City. The images coming out of Guadalajara right now, burning vehicles, empty streets, military convoys, smoke over the skyline, are not the images FIFA or Mexico's government wants the world to see ahead of one of the biggest sporting events on the planet. FIFA has not publicly commented on the unrest or its potential impact on World Cup preparations. The Mexican government insists normality is being restored. President Sheinbaum says security will be maintained. And it may be. But the events of February 22, 2026 have made one thing undeniably clear. The cartels in Mexico are not just criminal organizations. They are parallel governments, with armies, with weapons capable of downing military aircraft, with the power to shut down an entire country's transport system in hours, with the ability to force a nation of 130 million people to stay inside their homes. And one man's death, as significant as it is, does not change that overnight. Pray for the people of Mexico, the innocent civilians who just wanted to get through their Sunday, the people whose cars were taken and burned, the families of the 25 National Guard members who died protecting their country, the tourists stranded in hotel rooms across Puerto Vallarta and Guadalajara. They didn't ask for this. They never do. The bigger picture, El Mencho's story, from a poor kid in Michoacan to undocumented immigrant in California, to convicted drug offender to police officer, to the most powerful and feared drug lord in Mexico, is not just one man's story. It is the story of what happens when poverty, corruption, violence, and the global demand for drugs create a system where the cartel is more powerful than the state, where a man with no future can build an empire of fear that holds an entire nation hostage. El Mencho is dead, but the system that made him is still very much alive. And until that changes, there will always be another El Mencho.